The portrait of a couple looked ordinary until experts found a dark secret. The photograph sat in a cardboard box for decades, forgotten among dusty family albums and yellowed letters. It showed a young couple, both around 25 years old, dressed in the formal clothes of the 1850s American South. The woman wore a dark silk dress with delicate lace at the collar, her hair pulled back in the style of the time. The man beside her sat upright, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, both looking straight at the camera with the serious faces common in early photography. At first glance, there was nothing strange about the image. It seemed like countless other daguerreotypes from that period. A portrait of wealth, a moment frozen in time. The couple appeared to be seated on an elegant white bench covered with fine fabric that fell to the floor. The setting suggested wealth and status common among plantation owners in antebellum Georgia. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, a historian who studies Southern material culture at Emory University, first saw the photograph at an estate sale in Savannah. She was sorting through boxes of historical papers when the image caught her eye. Something about the way it was set up felt wrong, though she could not say right away what bothered her. "I almost passed over it," she later said. But there was something in the way the fabric hung that did not make sense. She bought the whole box for $50 and took it back to her lab. Using high-resolution scanning tools, Dr. Morrison started a close look that would reveal one of the most troubling objects of American slavery ever recorded. What she found under that white fabric would force museums, historians, and descendants to face an uncomfortable truth about how far dehumanization had gone in the antebellum South. The investigation was about to start. Dr. Morrison put the daguerreotype under her lab's digital microscope, a tool that could magnify details the naked eye could not see. Late afternoon sun came through her office windows as she adjusted the focus, her coffee growing cold beside her keyboard. She had looked at hundreds of old photographs, but something about this one needed closer attention. The first odd thing showed in the way the white fabric hung. Instead of falling naturally as cloth would over furniture, the material showed uneven shapes, curves that suggested something living under it. Dr. Morrison zoomed in on the lower part of the image, where the fabric met the floor. There, barely visible, was what looked like the edge of a human hand. Her breath caught. She leaned closer to the screen, her heart beating faster. "That cannot be right," she whispered to herself, adjusting the contrast and brightness, but the more she improved the image, the clearer it became. The fabric was not covering a bench at all. It was covering a person. She could now see the slight rise and fall of what looked like a human back. The fabric stretched tight over shoulder blades. Near the bottom left corner, 5 fingers were partly visible, pressed flat against the wooden floor as if holding weight. The position was clear. Someone was on their hands and knees under that cloth, serving as living furniture for the couple sitting above. Dr. Morrison felt sick. In her 15 years studying the material culture of slavery, she had recorded many cruelties. But this level of dehumanization, captured so casually, so proudly, struck her as especially horrible. She picked up her phone and called Dr. James Chen, a colleague who specialized in photographic analysis and checking authenticity. "James, I need you to see something. Can you come to my office right now?" "What is wrong, Rebecca? You sound upset." "Just come, please, and bring your checking equipment." Within the hour, a second set of expert eyes would confirm what she had found. Dr. James Chen arrived with his portable analysis kit, a metal case filled with special lenses, chemical testing strips, and digital measuring tools. He found Dr. Morrison standing by her window, arms crossed, looking out at the campus below where students walked between classes, unaware of the horror being examined just floors above them. "Show me," he said simply. She brought up the improved images on her computer. Dr. Chen studied them in silence for several minutes, his face changing from curiosity to focus to something darker, a tightening around his eyes that Dr. Morrison knew as held-back emotion. "We need to check this is not a modern fake," he said at last, his voice carefully calm. "Can I examine the original?" Dr. Morrison took the daguerreotype from its protective sleeve. Dr. Chen put it under his stereo microscope, checking the surface for any signs of digital change or physical tampering. He tested the edges with chemical reagents that would show modern glues or treatments. He measured the oxidation patterns of the silver plate, checked the case for materials right for the period, and looked at the mat board for age-related wear. After 90 minutes of careful examination, he stepped back from his tools. "It is real," Mid-1850s, definitely Georgia based on the photographer's mark on the reverse. No sign of any change at all. So it is real, Dr. Morrison said quietly. They really did this. They really did this, Dr. Chen confirmed, and they were proud enough of it to order a formal photograph. The two historians sat in heavy silence. The meaning was huge. While slavery's brutalities were well known, the whippings, the chains, the forced separations of families, this photograph showed something even more harmful. The complete reduction of a human being to an object, not even given the dignity of being seen. We need to identify everyone in this photograph, Dr. Morrison said. The couple, the photographer, and especially the person under that fabric. They deserve to be known. Dr. Chen nodded. Where do we start? The photographer's mark and the place where this was taken. Someone ordered this portrait, which means there are records. The photographer's mark on the back of the daguerreotype case read J. Whitmore, Daguerrean Artist, Savannah, Georgia. Dr. Morrison began her search in the Savannah Public Library's local history archives, where business directories from the 1850s were kept on microfilm. The old machine hummed as she scrolled through page after page of faded advertisements and listings. She found James Whitmore listed in the 1854 directory, with a studio address on Broughton Street in the heart of Savannah's business area. His advertisement promised lifelike portraits for careful families and scenes of home prosperity expertly made. The irony of that phrase, home prosperity, made her stomach turn. From the city directory she moved to property records. Whitmore's studio had been in a building owned by a merchant named Thomas Bradford, who also appeared in census records as a cotton broker with large land holdings. This was promising. Wealthy customers of photographers often came from connected social groups. Dr. Morrison asked for the Bradford family papers from the Georgia Historical Society. 3 days later, an archivist brought 6 boxes of materials to her research table. Letters, account books, plantation inventories, and family photographs. She worked through the documents carefully, looking for any link to the couple in the photograph. In a leather-bound ledger from 1855, she found an entry that made her stop. Payment to J. Whitmore, photographer, for family portrait and additional artistic work, $15. $15 was a large sum in 1855, far more than a simple portrait would cost. The phrase additional artistic work suggested something special, something made to order. She pulled out her laptop and matched a digital copy of her photograph with other images from the Bradford collection. The wallpaper pattern in the background matched. The style of the furniture visible at the edges of the frame matched. She had found the location. Now she needed to identify the people. And that meant going into the darkest records of all, the plantation's slave inventories. The slave inventory from the Bradford plantation dated December 1854 listed 37 human beings as property. Each entry included a name, an estimated age, an assigned money value, and sometimes a short note about skills or physical condition. Dr. Morrison's hands shook a little as she photographed each page with her phone, saving the evidence even as she struggled with the weight of what she was reading. Isaac, male, age 28, field hand, $1,200. Sarah, female, age 19, house servant, $900. Benjamin, male, age 32, blacksmith, $1,400. The cold language, the reduction of human lives to money figures, was almost too much, but she forced herself to continue knowing that somewhere in these pages might be the identity of the person in the photograph. Near the end of the inventory, she found an entry that stopped her. Marcus, male, age 24, house servant, noted for obedience, $850. The age matched. The note-house servant meant Marcus would have worked inside the plantation house where such a photograph would have been taken. And that chilling phrase, noted for obedience, suggested someone who had been broken enough to bear the unbearable. Dr. Morrison checked the inventory against family letters. In a letter dated March 1855, Elizabeth Bradford wrote to her sister in Charleston, "Thomas has arranged for Mr. Whitmore to take our likeness in the new parlor. We shall make quite the impression with our new furnishings." New furnishings. The soft word made Dr. Morrison close her eyes, fighting back tears and anger in equal measure. She now had a name, Marcus, and she had the slave owners, Thomas and Elizabeth Bradford. But Marcus's story did not end with this photograph. She needed to find out what happened to him, whether he survived the war, whether he ever found freedom. The next part of research would take her to the Freedmen's Bureau records and post-war census data, following one man's path from object to free person. Dr. Morrison's look into Thomas and Elizabeth Bradford showed a couple who stood at the top of antebellum Southern society. Thomas, born in 1829, had inherited his father's cotton business at age 21 and quickly grew it throughout coastal Georgia. By 1854, he controlled over 2,000 acres and held money interest in 6 different plantations. Elizabeth, born Elizabeth Hutchinson, came from an equally important Charleston family with deep roots in the slave trade. Their wealth was huge, even by the standards of the plantation elite. Tax records showed property holdings valued at over $200,000, equal to roughly $7 million today. The couple moved in the highest social circles, hosting large parties at their Savannah townhouse and their country estate. But it was their letters that showed the casual cruelty under their polite surface. In letters to family members, they talked about enslaved people with the same distance they might talk about livestock or furniture. Elizabeth's diary, kept in the Historical Society, held entries that made Dr. Morrison's research assistant leave the room in distress. Marcus performed well enough today during the Hendersons' visit, Elizabeth wrote in April 1855. The new arrangement Thomas thought of makes for striking talk. Several guests remarked on our cleverness and training. Training. The word carried meanings Dr. Morrison could barely think about. How had Marcus been trained to bear being used as furniture? What mix of physical punishment, mental control, and systematic dehumanization had been needed to break a human being down to that level? She found her answer in the plantation overseer's logbook, a document so disturbing that the Historical Society had kept it in limited access for decades. The overseer, a man named William Crenshaw, had written down his methods with cold exactness: isolation, starvation, public shame, and brutal beatings for any sign of resistance. Marcus's name appeared often in those pages. He had not given in easily. "Marcus needs more correction," one entry read. "We will continue treatment until obedience is total." The start of the Civil War in 1861 broke the Bradfords' world. Thomas, like many rich planters, paid a substitute to fight in his place, a common practice that let the rich avoid military service. But the war's money impact could not be avoided. The Union naval blockade stopped cotton exports, and the Confederate money that backed Thomas's fortune became more and more worthless. Dr. Morrison found records showing that by 1863, Thomas had sold several properties and let go most of his household staff to cut costs. But the slave inventory showed that Marcus stayed on the property through the war years. Whatever his role had been in that household, it had made him valuable enough to keep even in hard times. In January 1865, as General Sherman's forces came near Savannah during their march to the sea, the Bradfords fled to relatives in Charleston. They took only what they could carry in a single carriage. The plantation house was left empty, leaving 37 enslaved people suddenly, unexpectedly free of guards. What happened next was recorded in several sources: Union Army reports, Freedmen's Bureau interviews, and even a letter from a Northern journalist who visited the empty estate. The enslaved people did not run at once. Instead, they held a meeting in the plantation house itself, in the very rooms where they had been tortured and degraded. A Freedmen's Bureau agent named Captain Robert Holloway interviewed several of the formerly enslaved people weeks after liberation. His report, filed in March 1865, held a section that Dr. Morrison read and reread, her throat tight with feeling. A man named Marcus, about 35 years of age, spoke for the others. He showed clear speech and intelligence, going against entirely the slave owner's claims about the mental ability of the Negro. When I asked what he most wanted now that he was free, he replied, "To be seen, to be counted as a man, to never be invisible again." Those words, "to never be invisible again," struck Dr. Morrison as Marcus's direct answer to what had been done to him. He had been literally made invisible under that white cloth, reduced to nothing. Now he claimed his visibility, his humanity, his voice. After the war, Marcus did not vanish into anonymity as so many formerly enslaved people were forced to do. Dr. Morrison followed his path through Freedmen's Bureau records, Reconstruction-era newspapers, and church lists. What she found was a man who had survived unimaginable trauma and turned it into firm activism. In 1866, Marcus registered to vote under the Reconstruction Acts, giving his full name as Marcus Freeman, a last name he had chosen himself, standing for his new status. He learned to read and write through a school set up by Northern missionaries, going to classes at night after working as a carpenter during the day. By 1868, he had become a community organizer in Savannah's African-American neighborhood, helping other formerly enslaved people deal with the complicated legal systems of Reconstruction. He testified before a congressional committee looking into violence against black voters, describing in detail the systems of control and dehumanization that had existed under slavery. A transcript of his testimony survived in the National Archives. Dr. Morrison asked for a copy and received it 3 weeks later. 37 pages of Marcus's words kept across 150 years. In his testimony, he spoke about the photograph, not directly by name, but the meaning was clear. They made us into things, he told the congressman, not just in how they worked us or beat us, but in how they thought of us. I was made to serve as an object in their home, to be less than a chair, less than a dog. They took a photograph of it, proud of what they had done. But I am here now speaking to you as a man, as a citizen, to say that we were always human. We never stopped being human, no matter how hard they tried to take that from us. The congressional record showed that several representatives cried during his testimony. But in the end, the political will for real Reconstruction faded, and the legal protections Marcus fought for were systematically taken apart over the following decades. Still, he continued, Dr. Morrison found his name on church lists, mutual aid society membership lists, and voter registration records through 1891. He had married, had 3 children, and lived to see them grow up free. Dr. Morrison knew that publishing her findings would be controversial. She spent weeks talking with colleagues, ethicists, and descendants of enslaved people about how to present such a disturbing image responsibly. Some argued it should never be shown, that displaying it would hurt again and re-objectify Marcus. Others insisted that hiding it would let people play down slavery's horrors. She decided to publish, but with full context and a focus on Marcus's full humanity, his resistance, his clear speech, his post-war activism. Her article titled Invisible No More, a daguerreotype and the Extremes of Dehumanization appeared in the Journal of Southern History in November 2023. The response was immediate and huge. Major news outlets picked up the story. The photograph spread on social media, getting millions of views and strong debate. Some viewers questioned if it was real, unable to believe that such cruelty had been photographed. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Chen released their full authenticity report in reply. Descendants of both the Bradfords and Marcus contacted Dr. Morrison. The Bradford descendants expressed horror and shame at their ancestors' actions. Several made donations to groups fighting human trafficking and supporting descendants of enslaved people. But it was Marcus's great-great-grandson, a retired teacher named James Freeman living in Atlanta, who gave the most moving response. He contacted Dr. Morrison and asked to see the photograph in person. She met him at her office on a cold December morning. James studied the image for a long time in silence. Then he spoke. My grandfather told me stories passed down from his father who had known Marcus. He said Marcus used to tell his children, remember that you are visible, that you matter, that no one can make you invisible again. We never knew what he meant. Now we do. James reached out and gently touched the glass covering the daguerreotype, his finger hovering over where his ancestor lay hidden. He survived this. He came out of it and built a life and a family. We are here because he refused to stay invisible. That is what I want people to understand. The photograph now lives in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. It is shown in the slavery exhibition, but with a key difference from how it was first made. Marcus is no longer invisible. The museum asked a forensic artist to work with Dr. Morrison's improved images and create a reconstruction of what Marcus would have looked like. A portrait painting now hangs beside the daguerreotype, showing a strong-featured man in his mid-20s, his eyes meeting the viewer's gaze directly. The placard reads, Marcus Freeman, c. 1830 to 1891, carpenter, activist, survivor. His humanity could 91. The exhibition also includes parts from his congressional testimony, photographs of the church he helped start, and a family tree showing his descendants, including 12 living great-great-great-grandchildren. Dr. Morrison continues her research, having identified 3 other similar photographs in various collections. Each stands for another enslaved person subjected to this particular cruelty, and each will now be properly recorded and honored. She has set up a research fund to help identify enslaved people in historical photographs, working to recover names and stories that were deliberately erased. The Bradford Plantation House, empty since the Civil War, was bought by a preservation trust and will be turned into an educational center focused on teaching the full truth about slavery. The room where the photograph was taken will be kept, but reimagined as a space of remembrance and reflection. On a warm spring morning in 2024, James Freeman stood in that room with his extended family, Marcus's descendants, 47 people ranging in age from 6 months to 93 years. They held hands in a circle and shared stories, reclaiming the space where their ancestor had suffered. "This photograph tried to make my great-great-grandfather invisible," James said to the group, "but we are standing here, all of us, because he survived, because he refused to be erased, because he insisted on being seen as fully human. That is the real story, not what they did to him, but who he became in spite of it." Outside, the Georgia sun filtered through ancient oak trees, their branches draped with Spanish moss. Inside, Marcus Freeman's family celebrated his life, his resistance, and his lasting legacy. The photograph that once stood for the depths of dehumanization had become, through their presence and memory, a testament to the indestructibility of human dignity. Marcus was invisible no more.